When Nadir Mohammed was a little boy in Tanzania, he thought the greatest treat in life was a Coca-Cola with salted peanuts in it. Now he is one of the most powerful business leaders in Canada. He and many other immigrants have interesting insights into us. I happen to be an immigrant and now Canadian citizen, journalist, writer, public servant, and Canada's 26th Governor General Adrienne Clarkson is also an immigrant and citizen. She has collected stories about refugees and immigrants in her new book, Room for All of Us. It is my pleasure to welcome the Right Honourable Adrienne Clarkson back to Studio 4 to tell us more.
Oh, Fanny, it's so great to be back with you. I love chatting with you.
Well, I love chatting with you too. So there you go. Perhaps it's because we were uprooted.
I think that there is a bond among people who are uprooted, and that means about 80% of Canadians were uprooted and came to Canada, and the rest of them, 100% of us, their parents or their grandparents were uprooted. And so we have in our memories and our collective unconscious the idea that we lost something and we now are in Canada and we have a different kind of life.
And you were uprooted in a tougher situation than I was. I simply married a Canadian. That was easy.
And that was it?
At the time.
Well, it's not
maybe
truth.
not anymore.
Truth and consequences.
Yes.
Well, all the people in this book are like aspects of one personality, including me. I add myself to the 8 that are in the book, because we all came out of war, persecution, people throwing us out because they didn't want us because we were Jewish or we were Ismaili or we were something they didn't particularly like, and they took everything away from us, everything. And we suddenly landed in Canada with nothing.
Certainly, when Idi Amin decided to put most of the Asians, if not all of the Asians, out of Uganda, it was to our benefit.
Yes, and that's why I call that chapter the present from Idi Amin. We got initially 10,000 Ismailis in 1972. There had never been really any Ismailis in Canada. And we got 10,000, and eventually we got 50,000, and I think now they estimate maybe 100,000 Ismailis. And you know how important they are in the life and fabric of Western Canada. I mean, the mayor of Calgary is a 39-year-old Ismaili called Nahid Nenshi. And who would have thought, right? But that's what happens. Canada is full of the unexpected because people come here unexpectedly and they make something of what they're given.
You met now Mayor Nenshi when he was 25 years old.
Yep. He came to Rideau Hall with a group called Canada 25 that he had organized out of the McKinsey. Some of them were with McKinsey Consulting, and they wanted to study public policy. They gathered money together to do study groups, etc. And they asked to see me as the Governor General, and we just thought they were a terrific group. So when we went back out to Calgary on trips, we would get in touch with them. So we kept in touch with Nahid, and I thought he is going to go into politics. I thought he's going to run, he's going to run maybe for councillor, or he'll run for the legislature in Alberta. I never dreamed that he'd run for mayor first out and that he'd get it.
I know. Especially in Alberta. Well, I shouldn't say that, but you do know that there is a bit of a redneck reputation.
I know, but there they have the first Muslim mayor in Canada. And that's what Canada is. It's very surprising, and it's not what it seems on the surface.
And he did not go up the ladder, so to speak, starting at council. He just said, I want the big job. I'm going for the big job. Apparently, he was quite a robust child.
He was a terrific kid, I think, and he was working from the time he was 9 years old because the family came and he had to work. They had a little laundromat. When they gathered a little bit of capital, they invested in a motel. They lost money in the motel because it was the 80s and interest rates went through the roof at 19-20%. There was a story of a lot of people. But he still kept working. He served coffee in a bingo hall. He did all sorts of jobs, and he helped his mother with her little business, which was selling lotto tickets at the Marlborough Mall, which I believe she just gave up because she wanted to have this little thing of her own, of being able to support her family if she needed to.
How interesting. The great part about all of it is that Canada allows immigrants to flourish, mostly. And immigrants who did flourish in their countries, they came from wealth, lost all their wealth, and came here. Not all of them came from wealth, I'm not suggesting that. But what allows Nadir Mohammed to become the CEO of Rogers and, big corporate man.
I know.
What does this country do right?
Well, I think what they do is something that I call benevolent neglect. We are kind, we don't harass people, we are basically very decent to people, and then we leave them alone. We leave them alone and they get on with it. So that though the odds may not be for them, the odds are never stacked against people in Canada. The odds were never stacked against me when I was a child. I found that through public school education and my teachers and just friends, the Canadian character, which has a fundamental decency to it. I will say that. I don't say we love everybody. We don't. And love is not going to get you a good society in any case. And society is not a love-in. But people are fundamentally very decent, and they're very wait and see in Canada. Well, so that's who you are. So let's see what you do. And they just leave you alone. And I think that's our great benefit.
The reasons people come are varied, as you know. When you live under a Pinochet in Chile, to escape that is a monumental adventure.
That dictatorship came in the middle of the night, that kind of a coup where the army takes over a democratically elected government. And to me, that was the first 9/11. That happened on September the 11th, 1973. And it was a terrific shock to a lot of people that Chile, which had the highest rate of literacy in South America, 97% of Chileans were literate. And we're not talking an underdeveloped country where nobody knew anything. We're talking this very educated country. And this happened to them, and then the brutality was enormous. The whole football stadium was turned into a large torture chamber. And the person that I focus on, Tamara Toledo, who's making a very good name for herself as a painter now, she was brought to the country at the age of 20 days, but her mother was tortured while she was pregnant with her. And this is a story that's repeated over and over again with the Chilean experience. And we received over 30,000 Chileans here as refugees, and I was quite involved with some of them.
And many Chileans desire to go back home, not stay back home necessarily, but desire to go back home, more so than people from other countries or less?
Well, I think sometimes that story, her story, is the one of where you go back and then you come back and you decide you've changed too much and you can't stay, even though you've dreamt of going back and staying. And I think that does happen with some people. You dream of something that you left behind, and then when you go there, you discover that it's not home anymore.
And someone said, perhaps you, that you can survive anything if you are determined. If you are determined, you are going to.
Yes.
Even brutality. If you are determined enough that you are going to, you can.
I think that's very important because so many of these people have been, if not physically molested, at least mentally. And you cannot be persecuted as a Jew and you're a 3 or 4 or 5-year-old child. I mean, Fred Bild, child of the Holocaust in my book, he knew at the age of 4 that Hitler was terrible and that they were being targeted, that he was Jewish and they were being targeted. This was in Germany, and that's why they had to flee. So even little children know these things. They feel this deeply. And you interiorize this, and it's a trauma, and that kind of trauma, I think, takes a long while to work out. So in a way, Canada is a place where people have the peace and quiet to work out the trauma of things that have happened to them somewhere else.
Well, Fred Bild went on to be a distinguished diplomat, a career Foreign Service officer.
And our ambassador to China.
Ambassador to China, all of that. Is he the one who had William Shatner
yes.
as his camp counselor?
Yes, he was 12, 13 years old when he came to Canada, and he was francophone by that point, not an anglophone, but because he was Jewish and because of our crazy education in Canada, he was in Montreal. If you were a Jew and you were francophone, you had to go to an English school because you were counted as a Protestant, okay? I mean, that's
right.
Canada. And so his mother thought his English wasn't good enough, and she got him a place at the B'nai B'rith camp. And William Shatner was his counselor, and William Shatner took an interest in him and put him in some plays. And after camp, he had already almost lost his accent, and he always counts William Shatner as having been the person who helped him. And they've never met again. I dream about their meeting, perhaps.
Well, the intriguing thing is they should meet.
Yes. Yes,
Maybe they
should.
will once
I hope
Shatner
so.
reads your book.
I hope so.
Don't you think we can underline that?
Yes, well, Fred hopes to meet him. And he felt that was to have somebody believe in him who was, you can imagine Bill Shatner was a handsome, young, 16-year-old, and he said, Freddie, you can be in this play. And Freddie, was only spoke French and German and some Flemish, and he learned how to speak really well because he was enunciating and memorizing for a part.
Is there a thread or some threads that run through all of the stories? The culture shock, the cold, dealing with winter.
Yes, dealing with
finding
winter.
a bathroom, figuring out how to use a latrine.
Well, this in the Vietnamese boat person that I have put in the book, John Tran.
Oh, cinematographer.
Cinematographer of the year, best documentarian of the year last year at age 39. Wonderful cinematographer, and I know I've worked in that business. As you can tell when somebody is wonderfully talented, and that's how I met him. He was the cinematographer on a documentary that was done on us. John and I, when we went north when I was Governor General. And so he is absolutely terrific. And there he was, having been a boat person, picked up by the Hong Kong Coast Guard in one of those floundering boats, put in a refugee camp in Hong Kong for nearly a year with his family. Then one day somebody comes along and says, you're going to go in an airplane. And he was so excited, never been in an airplane. He was 6 years old. And they said, and you're going to go to Canada. What? Canadians are taking you in as refugees, and you're going to go to Edmonton, Alberta, in January. And so they arrived in Edmonton, in the snow. And luckily, we had this wonderful organization called Operation Lifeline, where individuals and church groups and synagogue groups got together to sponsor families. Because the government, Joe Clark's government, said, we will take 25,000 boat people. And Canadian people said, that's not enough. There's hundreds of thousands of them needing this. And so the government said, if you sponsor them individually as groups, we'll let 25,000 more in. And Fred Bild was our ambassador to Thailand at the time of the Vietnamese boat people, and he organized all of that on the ground. That was our biggest immigration office at the time, was processing the Vietnamese boat people.
And the John Trans of the world probably had condensed milk in their coffee. Not sure how that all works, but those families stayed in touch for a long time.
Oh, yes.
Formed very strong connections. I'm sure he wondered, who am I?
Well,
who's my real family?
Well, I don't think he ever doubted that, but they certainly called their adopted families, the families who sponsored them, their grandmother, grandfather, and I talked to people who had been the sponsors, and to them, the sponsoring Canadian families, this is one of the most important life experiences they ever had, to give to this little family of refugees, mother, father, 4 little children, the means to go and take them to a bank, to how to open an account, help them get a job washing dishes at A&W, taking care of them in those sorts of ways, the practical things you need to know.
Sure.
And when we came to Canada, there was no official way of welcoming any refugees, but it's the middle of the Second World War. But people were just automatically very kind to us. I mean, there was a Jewish pharmacist down the street, the Malots, and when my mother had a prescription, he would explain it very carefully to her, and he'd say, come back and tell me how it worked. And then we got to be friends with their 2 sons, and we went to the same public school, and there were other people who walked us to school. There was this spontaneous kind of decency and kindness, which Canadians do have. I think it's because of our climate, because we know at some point it might be minus 30 outside, we'd have to knock on someone's door and they'd have to take us in.
And that they did. Right Honorable Adrienne Clarkson, our guest, Room for All of Us, her new book, Surprising Stories of Loss and Transformation. We'll come back and talk about some draft resistors in our midst.